June 15th, 2021, Rogersville, Tennessee. In the deep silence of the Appalachian Mountains, a 5-year-old girl named Summer Wells is planting flowers in the front yard. It's a typical, humid afternoon. The sun is beginning to set, and life feels still. Then, in a window of time shorter than it takes to brew a cup of coffee, the stillness turns into a void. Summer walks into her house, descends to the basement to play, and vanishes. No scream, no struggle. Just an empty room and a silence that has remained unbroken for nearly 5 years. Tonight, the archive reopens the file on the vanishing at Beech Creek. We go beyond the headlines to examine the forensic failures, the family under the microscope, and the digital echoes of a case that haunts the wilderness of Tennessee. You are watching the Cold Case Archive. To understand the disappearance of Summer Wells, we must look not at hours, but at seconds. June 15th, 2021, Rogersville, Tennessee. The summer heat is heavy, and the Wells' home, at the dead end of Beech Creek Road, is surrounded by a forest that seems to watch everything in silence. At 5 p.m., Summer is outside. She is 5 years old, with short blonde hair and a radiant energy. She is helping her mother, Candace, and her grandmother plant flowers. It is a calm, almost bucolic domestic scene. But the clock is ticking toward a point of no return. Around 5:30 p.m., Summer goes inside. The official family version is that she went down to the basement to play with her toys. Candace claims she went upstairs for just a few minutes to handle chores or check on the other children. When she calls out for Summer, silence is the only answer. Between 5:30 p.m. and 5:45 p.m., a window of only 15 minutes, the trail of Summer Wells goes stone cold. She wasn't seen leaving through any door. No neighbor heard a scream. None of the family dogs barked. In a house full of people, a 5-year-old child simply ceased to exist on the physical plane. When the first officers arrived at Beech Creek, they didn't find a suburban neighborhood easy to search. They found the vertical labyrinth of the Appalachian Mountains. The topography here isn't just a backdrop. It is an adversary. We are talking about ravines that drop off sharply, dense oak forests, and undergrowth so thick that an object just 6 feet away can become invisible. If Summer walked out the basement door and into the brush, she entered a territory where sound is swallowed and clues vanish into the damp, unstable soil. Drones with thermal cameras were launched immediately, but the tree canopy was so dense that ground heat could barely be detected. Hundreds of volunteers and elite teams began scaling the slopes, hoping to find a shoe, a fall mark, a strand of hair. But the Tennessee mountains guard their secrets with a primitive ferocity. But here lies the first great mystery that defies investigators to this day. Elite K9 units were brought to the property just hours later. Dogs, trained to detect human, sent from miles away. They circled the house, entered the forest, and came back, confused. Summer Wells' scent did not lead into the woods. It seemed to end abruptly, at the edge of the road. If she didn't get lost in the mountains, was someone waiting for her on the asphalt? Or was the danger never truly on the outside? The disappearance of Summer Wells triggered one of the most massive search and rescue operations in the history of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. This wasn't just a local police matter. It was an armada. Within 48 hours, over 100 agencies were on the ground. Search teams utilized high-frequency drones, specialized K9 units trained for both live scent and cadaver recovery, and dive teams that plunged into the murky, cold waters of nearby ponds and creeks. They weren't just looking for a little girl. They were looking for a single blade of grass out of place. But as the days turned into weeks, a haunting forensic reality began to set in. Despite thousands of man-hours and the most advanced thermal imaging technology available, the mountains yielded nothing. No footprint, No torn piece of her favorite pink shirt. No DNA in the world of forensics. A total lack of physical evidence in a rugged environment is often more terrifying than finding a clue. It suggests that Summer didn't just wander off, she was removed. The TBI issued an Amber Alert with lightning speed, a move that signaled they believed Summer was in imminent danger. But there was a critical flaw in the early stages of the public appeal: the lack of a vehicle of interest. In rural Tennessee, trucks and SUVs are as common as the trees themselves. While investigators eventually flagged a potential red pickup truck seen in the area around the time of the disappearance, the description was too vague. No license plate, no distinct markings. This lack of a specific digital or visual footprint hampered early public tips. In a modern world covered by Ring, doorbells, and CCTV, Beech Creek Road was a digital dark zone. The investigators were flying blind, relying on memories and testimonies in a place where the closest neighbor is often a half-mile away through dense woods. As the physical search reached its limit, the focus shifted from the soil to the clouds. Forensic experts began the painstaking process of geofencing, trying to identify every cell phone that pinged off the nearest towers on June 15, 2021. They looked for digital shadows. Who was on that road? Who shouldn't have been there? But in the mountains, cell service is notoriously spotty, creating dead zones where a predator could move unseen and untraced. The investigation was moving away from the rugged terrain and into the cold, hard data of long-term surveillance and background checks. But as the TBI dug deeper into the digital lives of everyone involved, they stumbled upon something that changed the trajectory of the case. The focus was no longer just on the mountains or a mysterious red truck. The cameras were now turning back toward the house, back toward the people who were supposed to be Summer's protectors. In the vacuum left by the lack of physical evidence, a storm began to brew. The cameras that once scoured the mountains for Summer were now focused squarely on her parents, Doan and Candace Wells. True crime is no longer just investigated by the authorities. It is dissected in real time by millions. Every interview, every tear, and every stutter was analyzed by a digital jury. Doan and Candace didn't fit the perfect image of grieving parents that the public expected. Their history, marked by past legal struggles and a raw, rural lifestyle, became fuel for a fire that law enforcement couldn't extinguish. Doan Wells, in particular, became a polarizing figure. His frequent media appearances and sometimes contradictory statements created a narrative of suspicion. But in a court of law, weird behavior isn't evidence of a crime. The TBI was stuck in a delicate dance needing the parents' cooperation while simultaneously treating them as persons of interest in the shadows of the investigation. Then, a legal development sent shockwaves through the Hawkins County community. Just weeks after Summer vanished, the Department of Children's Services made a move that spoke louder than any police press release. Summer's 3 brothers were removed from the home. The official reasons were kept under seal, cited as unrelated to the disappearance, but the public perception was immediate. If the home wasn't safe for the boys, was it ever safe for Summer? This move shifted the entire atmosphere of the case. It wasn't just a search for a missing child anymore. It was an investigation into the very foundation of the Wells family. While Doan Wells maintained that the removal was a result of the media circus and harassment, the legal reality suggested a much deeper fracture within the household. The archive began to fill with records of a family struggling long before the afternoon of June 15th. The investigation now faced a brutal fork in the road. On one side, the theory of a sophisticated predatory abduction. A predator who knew the terrain, knew the family's schedule, and managed to snatch a child from a dead-end road without leaving a single trace. A ghost in the mountains. On the other side, The theory of an inside job, an accident, a moment of neglect, or something far more sinister that was covered up. Before the first 911 call was ever placed, investigators had to weigh the impossible silence of a kidnapping against the improbable lack of a crime scene inside the house. Both theories felt like dead ends. Both theories lacked the one thing the TBI desperately needed: a confession or a body. As the years passed, the noise of the media died down, but the digital wilderness remained loud. While the world moved on to the next headline, a group of dedicated strangers refused to let Summer's name fade. But as these online sleuths dug for the truth, they crossed a line that transformed the search for Summer into a war of misinformation and harassment. The search for Summer Wells didn't just happen in the woods of Tennessee. It exploded across the digital landscape. From Reddit threads to TikTok theories, internet sleuths kept her name alive when the mainstream media moved on. But this digital attention is a double-edged sword. In the vacuum of information, rumors were treated as facts. Harassment campaigns targeted neighbors and family members, and the noise sometimes drowned out the actual leads. Yet, among the chaos, these communities have become a massive archive of digital footprints. Thousands of eyes are still watching for that red pickup truck, still analyzing the 911 calls, and still refusing to let the mountains keep their secret. Investigators today acknowledge that the missing piece might not be in the Tennessee soil, but in a forgotten photo or a deleted comment on a social media thread. As we stand here in 2026, 5 years have passed since that humid afternoon. But time hasn't just brought silence, it has brought new tools. Cold case technology has leaped forward. We now have advanced DNA phenotyping, which can predict a person's appearance with startling accuracy from the smallest biological sample tools that weren't available at this level when Summer vanished. The Summer's Law initiatives have also gained momentum, pushing for even faster response times and more integrated surveillance in rural areas. The TBI continues to vet silent leads behind closed doors, hinting that the case is far from dormant. The investigation has shifted from a frantic search in the mud to a surgical operation in the laboratory and the database. The silence in Hawkins County remains unbroken, but the community hasn't forgotten. The vigils continue. The pink ribbons, once bright, may have faded under the Tennessee sun, but the collective memory of a 5-year-old girl who just went away still haunts these hills. Someone, somewhere, holds the final piece of this puzzle. Whether it's a memory that finally makes sense, a digital trail that was missed, or a secret that has become too heavy to carry, Summer Wells is not just a case file. She was a child with a future that was stolen in 15 minutes of impossible silence. The archive remains open. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Summer Wells, contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at 1-800-TBI-FIND. Look at this case through a fresh lens. Share this story. Because in the world of the cold case archive, no child is ever truly lost as long as someone is still looking. I'm the archivist. And the search for the truth continues.